Opinions expressed on Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio do not necessarily reflect or represent the views of Stingray Media, its staff, or contributors. Callers to the program accept full responsibility for the views expressed. The show host and affiliates are not liable for any statements made or any harm claimed. All callers to the program indemnify Straight Talk from all claims. Offensive, defamatory, or unlawful content will not be tolerated. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Now, here's Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio on Bobo 103.1.
And hello, K-Man, and welcome to another episode of Straight Talk here on Bobo 103.1 FM. We're your hosts, Austin Harris.
And I'm Ellio Solomon, and welcome to Straight Talk. How are you today? Mr. Harris?
I'm feeling very well. I'm feeling rather orange today. How about you, Mr. Solomon?
It definitely seems like we both got the memo, my friend.
Very clearly, we definitely got the memo.
That was a pleasant surprise.
It was a pleasant surprise indeed, though. You know, it was bound to happen at some point. But to the listening audience, in particular the viewing audience, we did not plan this in advance.
Yeah.
Kind of like, we do try to keep it in line when we get haircuts, but I haven't gotten one yet.
Neither have I.
No, but maybe over the weekend.
Well, if it's anything, you were the first runner because I'm sure you were here before me.
Yes.
And, I would have just recently jumped out of the shower and chose a shirt, so it must have mean the connection was...
Again, right there, man. I was thinking and...
Nosebleed.
That's right. That's right. Well, happy Friday to you and happy Friday to the listening audience. Once again, this is Straight Talk brought to you on your radio dial by Bobo 103.1 FM and simulcast live over YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook with the key search words Straight Talk Radio Show. Also being broadcast over the Facebook page for ACT Cruise Tourism as well. The phone lines are open at 745-2626. And again, this number is available to you should you wish to call in and speak directly with either of us here on the program or to share your views live on air. Likewise, you can also reach out to us on our version of the 1-800 number by dialing our WhatsApp number, 928-2562. And if you choose to use that route, you can either send us a WhatsApp audio note or a traditional WhatsApp text message. But either way, we will share your views, comments, and any other questions you may raise live on the air whilst we have it. I trust it was a productive Friday for you, my friend.
It is a productive Friday, but, there's honestly not enough time in the day. So when I'm finished here, I'm going to take off the shirt, take off a couple other items.
Okay.
Okay,
keep it G-rated, Ellio. Keep it
That's what I was going to say. Just so that we don't slip out of the boundaries here. But I will be going to work when I'm finished here. Let's put it that way. A couple of things to do.
To the farm again?
No. I'm just doing a little construction stuff.
I'm always amazed by, your multiple talents.
Yeah.
I mean,
I love
you're
construction.
farmer Ellio, but you're also the construction guy, which
The IT guy.
the IT guy,
The legal guy.
the legal guy, the sales guy.
Yeah, the philosopher.
And
the preacher, too.
the preacher,
Do a little preaching, too.
the ladies' man. Did I say that out loud? Was that just me? Thankfully, nobody else heard that except you and I.
Good, just between you and
Just
I.
between you and I. Well, it is Friday, and we are on the cusp of what will be a long weekend here in the Cayman Islands again. But you better enjoy it this time because it will be the last long weekend for several months until we get all the way up until November. Monday, of course, is Discovery. That's May 19th, and that's a public holiday. There will also be no Straight Talk on Monday. So whatever sleep you need, my friend, if you don't get it tonight, because obviously you have things to do, but let me encourage you to get all rested because we start off a fresh week. And again, as I stated, no long weekends to come. So it's going to be all business for us going forward.
Bang it up on Tuesday.
That's right. That's right.
Super Tuesday.
Super Tuesday. Quite right. Just a few quick Stingray event reminders. Yesterday, of course, we talked about some of the events going on over the weekend. Just a reminder to check out the 13th Annual Discovery Day Adventure Challenge that is being hosted tomorrow, the 17th of May, brought to you by CJ Britke and Stingray Media. It's going to be an adventure of epic proportions and $5,000 in cash on the line. This event is, of course, in its 13th year and has already sold out, but it still maybe a lot of fun to check out. You can log on to Stingray Media for details. Also, coming up in June, you don't want to miss the Cayman Islands Cancer Society's 30th anniversary casino night. You can go all in and support a cause that has probably touched all of us in one way or the other. This special event will be held on the 7th of June at Bacaro. Your ticket includes $100 in chips, delicious food stations, open bar with cocktails, wines and wells and spirits all night long, silent auctions, live jazz, and, of course, incredible raffles. Of course, your favorite casino games as well. And did we mention that there will be an incredible prize for the big winner on the night? The tickets are now on sale at cics.ky. And we look forward to seeing you at the Cayman Islands Cancer Society's 30th anniversary casino night, proudly sponsored by Health City and, of course, us here at Stingray Media. Sticking with the good news of the day, Ellio, as we try and strive to start off with some positive news, again, plucked from the headlines. It is the 16th of May, but as we draw ever closer to the 1st of June, the start of both rainy season and hurricane season, it is flying. But it's also mosquito season.
Mm-hmm.
And the MRCU, Mosquito Research and Control Unit, has already begun daytime aerial larviciding operations across Grand Cayman. So for those of you who may be new to the Cayman Islands and may have noticed some low-flying aircraft, don't worry, don't panic. That's just the Cayman Islands Air Force out on maneuvers, as my brother used to say. But yes, the MRCU aircraft will be flying at low altitude, making multiple passes over target areas to ensure full coverage and that no mosquito sites are missed. They are engaging in larviciding operations, which seek to target mosquitoes' larvae in standing water before they grow into biting adults. So, again, it's a proactive effort to reduce the mosquito population.
Proactive is good.
As opposed to showing up after the fact and going, hey, well, gee, I wish we could have fixed this problem before. Not pointing any fingers in any particular directions, mind you. But obviously this is beneficial to the Cayman Islands, not just for the simple annoyance that a lot of us in the summer months like to go outside. Well, some of you like to go outside, not a lot of us. I don't go outside until November to March when it's cooler. But after that, it's all indoor activity for me. But for the rest of you, you might like to go outside on the
rest
summer
of you
months.
plebs.
For the rest of you plebs and otherwise sun-seekers and the like. Many like to go outside and
sunbathers.
As you spend time outside, nothing is more annoying than that annoying little bzzz that flies around, and of course the stinging nature of their needles, aka the mosquito at work. So MRCO, of course, we want to say a great big thank you to them for the valuable service that they provide. But it's also a proactive health benefit for the jurisdiction as well. Right now, again, of course, in the Caribbean, June 1st is hurricane season, not just for us, rainy season, not just for us, but for many countries in the Caribbean. And currently, many countries in the Caribbean are experiencing mosquito-borne diseases or outbreaks such as dengue, Zika, and chikungunya. Well, the good news is we have none of those in the Cayman Islands. Knock on wood, as being grateful. And a big part of that is because of the proactive efforts led by MRCU and their aerial as well as ground spraying. Somebody mentioned to me the other day, I haven't seen an MRCU fogging truck in a long time. Well, they may not be as commonplace as they once were when we were younger, many, many moons ago, but they do still exist. I saw one just the other day in I don't know if it was my neighborhood or somewhere else, but I did see one. They do exist, but they are fogging on the ground and fogging again.
But they don't fog like they used to. When I was a kid, I mean, silly me, we used to run behind the MRCU.
So that's what happened.
Yeah, nobody said anything like.
You never inhaled, though, right?
Of course. You can't possibly run behind them and not inhale. I mean, I'm saying to myself, why did no one say anything like, hello, you're not supposed to be breathing that stuff? But it was like a big, huge white plume of smoke.
Yeah.
And as kids, I guess there was nothing more exciting than running behind these trucks.
Yes.
No one ever said, I mean, where were the adults? Hello. What are you thinking?
What are you thinking?
Yes, that and probably getting too close to the inhalation of bus fumes was another one.
A big thing for me was I used to enjoy going with my father to the
great
gas
smell
station.
of monoxide.
The gas station. When he would fill up with gas.
That
go,
too.
Oh, I love that smell. As
That
a
too.
kid. Yeah.
I'm telling you, kids love
did as
smelling
kids.
gasoline and carbon monoxide.
Yes. We also played with lead-based toys back then as well.
Stuck from the end of garden hose.
None of us died. Sucked water out of the end of a garden hose. Played outside, which, of course, I was reminded of. I reached out to my son, your godson, this afternoon, and he's, of course, in the UK. And I figured, well, it's 3 o'clock. He can't possibly be in class here today. As I reached out, called him, I got a hold of him. I said, son, what are you up to? Are you out and about, or are you still in class? He goes, no, Dad, it's hot outside. It's summertime in the UK.
Must be family.
Yeah, he definitely related. So he's avoiding the outside like the plague, and he was staying indoors, which he does often. If he's not studying, he's a gamer, so he plays online. He started that when he was here in high school, and obviously continued now that he's in the UK. I suppose I should be grateful because as a father, of course, you worry about your kids, particularly when they're, 5,000 plus miles away and you can't do anything if anything were to happen. And I always worry about my boy. He's a big guy. I'm sure he can, protect himself, and nobody messes with big guys in general. So I suppose my worry is for no reason at all except to raise my own personal anxiety.
Right.
So I am grateful that he's a gamer because he spends a great deal of time indoors anyway. He does go out. He does socialize. He does get into sports, which I'm grateful for. But
so you buy him an Xbox and say, use this. I want you to be safe.
He'll be completely safe and completely content. And thankfully, it's Xbox was our generation.
Okay.
The Genesis, the Atari. Again, that's how old we are.
Oh, yeah.
Remember when they played that tennis game? And that was the highlight of the game. Pink,
the ping pong?
Pink.
Yeah.
Pink.
They used to play that at Pagoda, too.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, my God.
Now these kids play online games, so they're playing on their desktops, and they're playing, of course, not just with themselves, but they're playing with the globe. A bunch of people get together,
that would be interesting, right?
Minecraft has started, and then there's a myriad of other games, online communities in which they're a part of. And of course, he's a gamer and he participates in that. So that's what he was doing this afternoon. And he actually said to me, Dad, give me 10 minutes. I'm in the middle of a game. I can't talk right now, but as soon as it's over, I'll give you a call. And he did. Of course, he made my
Probably
weekend.
didn't say it as nice, though. It's probably something like, oh, God.
It was like, hey, how you doing?
A few expletives.
What's wrong?
I'll call you back.
I'll call you back. You're disturbing me. You're bothering me here.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I spoke to my son today, and that was the highlight of my day, and I had to talk about him just a little.
Well, we appreciate that.
We used to talk about our kids a lot back in the day, but now they're all grown up, and we don't have that.
Well, sometimes you're not allowed to talk about them now.
Yeah, now they don't want us to talk about them now.
Why are you talking about me on the radio?
Don't praise my name on your show. Speaking of which, though, I do want to big up again. We haven't done it for a while, and though we haven't gone out for dinner in a while, but again, I want to remind folks, you got a long weekend. If you haven't checked out Kojima, the newest Japanese restaurant in downtown Georgetown, which, again, I'm happy to say is a family business run by my colleague's daughter and her husband. A fantastic restaurant, truly terrific food. If you want a great night with some great views and a great venue.
Great atmosphere.
Fantastic atmosphere. Killer wine list. And again, truly some really great food. You can either have sushi.
I'm hearing a voice, Austin.
You're hearing
the voice is saying, did I not say not to talk about it?
Well, we didn't call you by name.
They still know what we were talking about.
Didn't call you by name, Sydney.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, we just do it because we're dads and we love you.
There you go.
You just have to put up with us
for
the time being. So check out Kojima. Every time I say that name, I think of you. The Japanese, they speak from diaphragm.
From diaphragm. Yeah. I gave you that one, right?
I know, it cracks me up. You make me laugh, buddy. You really do. Yeah, but you also make me think as well. Just speaking of thinking, and just very quickly, I see today, Ellio, that 3 out of the 4 online digital newspapers are now carrying the subject that we've been talking about for the better part of 2 days. And that, of course, is the examination of the pre-FU, the pre-election financial update, against the backdrop of the Q1 financials, which were published just this week. And I think that's encouraging. I'm glad to see that it's now in the media and people have something to look at and read and compared against, the backdrop of what we, of course, started first. And yes, we do like to be first when we can. But I wanted to very briefly and very quickly, but at the first opportunity, provide a degree of an amendment to some of the comments we were making yesterday. Throughout the day yesterday, we kept asking ourselves, there must be something missing from this conversation that we were just not seeing. obviously referring to the pre-election financial update that forecast a deficit position of $26 million for 2025 as compared to the quarter one financials that came out on Wednesday, suggesting a surplus position. And of course, at face value, it was very shocking to us to see us go from deficit to surplus in just a matter of weeks. And, we offered up a few comments that, perhaps, may have been misleading, and I wanted to correct it in the first instance. And I also want to give defense for my colleague, because it was you, Ellio, that asked, and again, this is why I say I love your mind, and, I love how we interact with one another. But you did ask repeatedly, well, what were the periods that the pre-FU covered as compared to the report that was published on Wednesday this week? And though we read it out loud maybe a couple of times, as an old saying goes, sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees. It was not, immediately available to our minds in terms of what is it that we are missing. But we were certain that we were missing something, because we felt it was rather incredulous or unbelievable that the honorable persons that make up the Ministry of Finance could possibly get the numbers so drastically wrong. And I'm delighted to say they didn't get it wrong, and the pre-FU is not foo-foo, and it didn't suggest that perhaps the recommendations that were made or the observations that were made financially pre-election were anyhow different than what was shared after the election just this week. And here it is, and never before.
Well, they did get the, from what I can gather, they did get the estimation a little bit wrong. They got more surplus than they anticipated.
Right, exactly. They got more surplus than anticipated. But I think here's the rub, and here's the thing that was not immediately available to us yesterday in our discussion until about the tail end of the program. Literally in the last 5 minutes of the program, we were talking, but I was multitasking and I was looking at the paperwork because I was still, trying to digest what we were looking at. And then it jumped off the page at me. But unfortunately, we ran out of time, and never before in the last 3 months did I wish we had an extra hour, because certainly it would have been an opportunity to, again, round off the conversation and provide a bit of clarification to what we were saying. But here it is, folks. The difference between the pre-election economic financial update that was published in April 2025 as compared to the report that came out on Wednesday. The pre-FU looked at the economic forecast for the entire government's fiscal year up until the year end of 31st December 2025 and forward looking to 31st December 2026, whereas the quarter one financial update that came out and was published on the government website on Wednesday obviously took a look at the first quarter earnings, the first 3 months of 2025. And again, the reminder is there are 3 more quarters left in the year. So it is theoretically possible that we may still end 2025 in a deficit position and 2026 as well. So the pre-FU is not foo-foo.
But that's unlikely.
But it is unlikely, because also there are, and again, I have to give flowers whilst they're still alive and listening. As one caller pointed out, the National Coalition for Caymanians, the new government, also have an opportunity now to dictate or to make changes that will reflect a different outcome at the end of the financial year. Obviously, they have the responsibility, as we've been talking about, to, in the first instance, provide a strategic policy statement, which will outline what their plans and vision will be for the next 4 years. But they also, as part of the public management and finance law, need to present a budget, the first of two-year budgets, before the end of the fiscal year, December 31st, 2025. So at some point in time before the end of the year, we'll go back to Parliament and we'll get a new budget that will take us through 2 years. The government could scale back or roll back some of the extravagant expenditure items of the previous administrations. And we know that they will, because they've stated so much in the media that things like the Brax High School, for example, will be scaled back a little bit and won't cost perhaps the high-end, price tag that the previous administration had set for itself. Perhaps also they could scale back the Scranton Park, that in its current version will look like Central Park in New York. And not saying that's a bad thing. It certainly was ambitious, but it is a high price tag item, and maybe the government will take a more fiscally prudent approach. All of those things the government will do, could do, that could obviously impact the outcome of the current financial position of the Cayman Islands and bring us back in line with the framework for fiscal responsibility, which requires us to be in surplus and not deficit. But again, we just weren't seeing that yesterday at immediate face value, and I put that largely on me because, again, we were seeking, we were convinced that there was something we were missing, but we just weren't seeing it. And I thought it was important because, we tell people all the time, and we're celebrating 3 months of being on the air just 6 days ago on the 10th of March, 10th of May, excuse me. And we often say, what is it that sets us apart from other radio shows in the Cayman Islands? And one of the things is that we do not tear people down, in particular our own Caymanians. And I say that to say that whilst we may have offered up some, and I may have, take full responsibility, I may have offered up some criticism of the Ministry of Finance, the Honorable Financial Secretary, and the Honorable Accountant General, who we hold in high regard. And again, we stated that many times yesterday. But if I gave the perception that I was somehow tearing them down, then certainly that was not the case. There was no malicious intent in our discussions, but quite to the contrary. We operate in a live environment, and as you oftentimes see in our, evening initial banter, we talk about the issues. We talk about them in a live, sort of on-the-fly environment, and we add that sort of, live discovery to our running commentary. So we're thinking out loud as we talk to you on the conversation in our shows. But we were not seeking to tear down persons. But if there was a perception or some in the listening audience thought, maybe you're being troublemakers, maybe you're attacking these individuals incorrectly or inappropriately, I want to apologize. That certainly was not the case. Also, as we stated yesterday, we hold these gentlemen in high regard, referring specifically to the persons who hold the post of Financial Secretary and Accountant General. And we thought it was incredulous, unbelievable, unlikely that they got it so wrong, and I'm glad they didn't get it wrong. The pre-foo is not foo-foo. It is accurate, but it looked at an entire year, whereas the Q1 financials looked at the first quarter. Another point that was raised was that the Q1 financials represented the single largest earning for government in history so far, the single largest quarter. And that's also not surprising because, as we know, and now we educate the listening public, that the first quarter of every year is always the richest for government because that's when they collect the legal fees or the licensing fees
banking
from
fees.
The financial services sector. So the country's always flush with cash the first quarter of every year, but then that starts to dwindle down as we get into the second, the third, and the fourth quarter. So again, there's nothing unusual with the first quarter being a high revenue opportunity. But also, another goal that we set ourselves for ourselves and what sets us apart is that we strive to trade in facts, not speculation. Though sometimes in the absence of those facts being immediately available, we have to speculate to gain those facts. But the goal is always to come back to the center, and that is, of course, to present facts because it is more important for us as a talk show and as show hosts to present facts and to teach you something, to help our listening audience learn something they didn't know prior to tuning in, rather than just providing sheer entertainment value. So it was important that we provided this addendum and certainly to clarify our position. We were in search of the truth, and we will always go out seeking the truth, even though sometimes it is not immediately available. And even when it is, like yesterday, it wasn't quite jumping off the page, but it did sort of jump off the page in the closing moments. And, oh, boy, did I wish we had, an extra
Still had it
hour.
caught in your teeth.
I had it caught in my teeth. And worse, it was stuck in my mind for the 24 hours before we came back here. So I didn't get any sleep last night. I thought of you as well. I was up at dark 30 from way early. But again, we want to provide this clarification. And I'm glad that we, obviously saw it. And that is the situation. For more details, if you didn't catch the conversation yesterday, you have at least 3 opportunities to read about it in today's media.
I still believe that there's some little anomalies and stuff there. I mean, even in terms of what we read, there was a situation where clearly there was a projection in terms of making X amount of funds, and they've exceeded that.
Yes.
So I think those things are relevant, or are relevant. And I think that there's probably some lessons we can probably learn from that as well. But, we can discuss it another time.
No, absolutely.
I think you've said a mouthful.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate you letting me say that. It is, what is it? I don't know. I can't tell because our computer
It is 4:58.
It's 4:58 in studios, and we do need to pause, take a short commercial break. I see a caller on the line. I ask that caller to stay with us, as we will come back in just a few moments for more Straight Talk here on Bobo FM.
Bobo.
Welcome to our newsroom here in central London. We place ourselves here at a little desk right in the thick of things.
OS from the BBC.
We can catch the very latest news from our colleagues, not just in this enormous room, but also from our colleagues around the world.
I'm in the room where they're treating children.
This is a combat zone.
The situation after the typhoon is very complicated.
It was a very tense situation.
OS from the BBC.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM.
BBC News.
BBC News.
World news from the BBC. Violent clashes. Thick black smoke.
A tremendous legal victory.
Crucial elections.
Destructive winds.
A search and recovery operation.
A race against time.
An imminent threat.
Flying a drone over a rival team's training session.
Whatever is happening, wherever it's happening, catch up with the latest news bulletins from the BBC.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM.
The BBC's From Our Own Correspondent.
In today's Russia, no one is allowed anywhere near the political stage if they pose a serious challenge to Vladimir Putin.
Stories and reflections from our reporters around the world.
There is a major sense of insecurity here.
More people are coming in from Sudan every day.
From Our Own Correspondent from the BBC.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM. This is Bobo 103.1, powered by Health Services Authority.
At Health Services Authority, they are committed to caring for you. They are Cayman's largest and longest-standing healthcare provider, offering the most comprehensive range of inpatient, outpatient, and public health services at 9 different locations across all 3 islands.
Across Cayman on 103.1 FM, online, and on your smart speaker. The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo 103.1.
Hello, I'm Eileen McHugh with the BBC News. Israel has dropped leaflets across northern Gaza, urging Palestinians to leave the area as concern grows that it's preparing to intensify its offensive against Hamas. The UN Human Rights Chief, Volker Turk, says the attacks and the blocking of aid amount to ethnic cleansing. Wira Davis is in Jerusalem.
This may not yet be the start of Operation Gideon's Chariots, the major military offensive in Gaza repeatedly promised by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But it was, say local sources, the biggest air, ground and naval attack since the breakdown of the last ceasefire. Several areas in northern Gaza were targeted. Israel said it was attacking armed Palestinian groups, which they accuse of operating from within civilian structures. But according to eyewitnesses, the bombing was intense, killing dozens of civilians and forcing hundreds of others to flee.
Ukraine's major European backers have rallied behind it after the first direct peace talks between Kiev and Moscow in 3 years ended without the wanted 30-day ceasefire. After a call with Donald Trump, President Macron of France said European nations were coordinating with Washington on further sanctions if Russia keeps refusing a ceasefire. From Istanbul, Orla Giran reports.
The talks lasted less than 2 hours and exposed sharp divisions. A Ukrainian source said Moscow demanded that Kyiv withdraw its troops from large parts of its own territory to get a ceasefire. Ukraine's fear is that Moscow wants to continue its war and is engaging in talks just to buy time. President Zelensky, speaking at a European summit in Albania, said the world must keep Russia under pressure to end the conflict.
The man who tried to murder the British author Salman Rushdie in New York State in 2022 has been sentenced to 25 years in prison. Hadi Matar repeatedly stabbed Sir Salman at a literary event, leaving him blind in one eye. President Trump has accused the former FBI director, James Comey, of using a coded Instagram post to call for his assassination. The post showed an image of 8647 spelled out in seashells. 86 can be slang for kill. Mr. Trump is the 47th president. Mr. Comey, fired by Mr. Trump during his first presidential term, took down the post after a backlash and said he opposed all violence. Speaking to Fox News, Mr. Trump dismissed Mr. Comey's claim he was unaware the photo might have violent connotations.
The FBI director, and you don't know what that meant assassination. And it says it loud and clear. Now, he wasn't very competent, but he was competent enough to know what that meant.
World News from the BBC. The US Supreme Court has kept in place its temporary block on President Trump's planned deportation of Venezuelan migrants under a 1798 law previously used only in wartime. The American Civil Liberties Union reported that the Trump administration was about to deport some migrants without giving them the required notice or the opportunity to contest their removal. The Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has blamed Russian hackers operating on Telegram for a cyber attack that's hit the party's website 2 days before presidential elections. He said that efforts were underway to thwart the attack. Adam Easton reports from Warsaw.
Poland is home to the main international hub for military and humanitarian supplies for Ukraine. According to Mr. Tusk's government, it has become Russia's prime target in the European Union for cyber attacks. Both frontrunners in Sunday's presidential election, the Liberal Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski and National Conservative historian Karol Nawrocki, support continued assistance for Kyiv. But Mr. Nawrocki has said he opposes Ukraine's membership in NATO and the EU, whilst bilateral disputes remain unresolved.
Hundreds of women have held a rally in the Bangladeshi capital Dhaka in support of a government-appointed commission to address gender-based discrimination. The Women's Affairs Commission has made recommendations such as increasing the number of parliamentary seats held by women and giving women equal inheritance rights. 2 years after a case that caused uproar in France when a cat escaped and was killed by a train that refused to wait, the national rail operator has issued rules on what to do if a passenger's pet escapes onto the tracks. Station staff will have 10 minutes to clear up any doubts by trying to spot the animal from the platform. They will then have 10 minutes to safely remove it. That's the latest from BBC World News.
Opinions expressed on Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio do not necessarily reflect or represent the views of Stingray Media, its staff, or contributors. Callers to the program accept full responsibility for the views expressed. The show host and affiliates are not liable for any statements made or any harm claimed. All callers to the program indemnify Straight Talk from all claims. Offensive, defamatory, or unlawful content will not be tolerated. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Now, here's Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio on Bobo 103.1.
And welcome back, hey man, to more Straight Talk here on Bobo 103.1 FM with your host, Ellio Solomon, myself, Austin Harris. On this beautiful Friday evening, the 16th of May, we'll be with you all the way until 6:30 p.m. as the phone lines will be open on this Open Mic Friday at 745-2626. Or, of course, you can reach out to us on our WhatsApp line, 928-2562. Again, the first topic of discussion taken from today's headlines: strong financial report casts doubt on the pre-election forecast. The first paragraph reads, better than expected financial results for the first quarter of the year have led to calls by the opposition PPM party to reevaluate the pre-election report that forecasts a $26.2 million government deficit by the end of 2025. I know that the deputy leader of the opposition, the Honorable Kenneth Bryan, was quoted in today's media report in the Compass suggesting that he does have an issue, or does take issue with the PREFU and its findings against the backdrop of what was shared in the public domain in terms of Wednesday's quarter one financial report. And we do have the pleasure of having the deputy leader of the opposition, Mr. Kenneth Bryan, on the phone with us now. Good evening, Mr. Bryan. Are you there?
I am here, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, sir. Happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday to you, too, as well as Mr. Solomon in the room. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you for having me. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, sir. Hear you perfect.
Oh, okay. I want to say thank you so much for taking the time yesterday or the day before, I can't remember.
Yesterday.
To assess the new report for the unaudited quarterly financial report for the first quarter. And I just overheard you in your first part of the show saying that, it may not be as beautiful as it may seem, and their report will still be as projected. I want to, from a perspective of analyzing this together, being open-minded to the fact that I could potentially be wrong, but I don't think so. But also from a perspective of you coming from a background of finance. I come from a background in media, but I did start off in accounting, so I think I have at least the foundation of that, as well as being a minister for 4 years, to think that I have a good assessment of both reports. Mm-hmm. And my assumption here, and I depend on your expertise as well to look at both reports, because this is an anomaly, but a very serious one. Because if there was a wrong projection, it had a major effect on the election, and that's why we have to get this right as to what went wrong, because something isn't adding up. And I want to go through that with you if that's possible on the show.
Yep,
sure.
Okay, so we know that the government and the Ministry of Finance are obligated by law to issue this pre-election financial update report for 2 years, for the year that is current and the following. And to be honest, I question why you need it for the next year, especially with the government will have their own policies that would affect the finances, but that's what the law mandates.
Yeah,
and
Section
in that
26 of the Public Management and Finance Act.
Correct. So that's neither here nor there whether it should be next year, but for this year is definitely important to know. And ultimately, the report, which everybody's focused on, is that their projections, based on the expenses, based on the revenues, is ultimately the country would have had a $26 million deficit. And that heavily weighed in the minds of the voters of this country some 2 weeks ago. So the question is whether those projections, and I want to read on page 5 if possible. I know you may have the report. A very important point that they have made in their first commentary under the proposed content of this document. And the last thing it says is, additionally, the preview contains forward-looking projections that are based on existing policies, economic assumptions, and known fiscal commitments. While these projections consider known risk, unforeseen circumstances and economic uncertainties could lead to actual results that may differ materially from the projected results. So what that means is this report cannot be relied on because the projections of either the expenses or the revenues could come back different until the actuals come in.
Yep.
And that's where we now turn to the first quarter actuals. But before I get to that report, I think it would also be important that we go over when this report was made and what financials they were looking at. And I know if you turn to page 4 of the report, you'll see the dates on which the forecast information were finalized. They were finalized, the economic forecast, on the 25th of March, 2025. And the final report was released and gazetted on the 2nd of April. Now, just being the former Minister of Tourism, I know for certain that the financials for tourism would not have come in at all until May the 1st, because the law says the revenues for that month cannot be released or collected in accuracy because they're allowed 1 month after the date, after the month of collection it is due. They're under law, they're allowed 1 full month before they can pay all the bills. So you'll never know what the total amount will be until May 1st. And I know that just from my sector. So what I do also know, if they're doing the economic forecast for the revenues, it's a projection. They won't know the actuals for on the 25th of March for many of the different areas. I think they can safely say they would know what the actuals would have been for January and may possibly be February. So with that in mind, they wouldn't have known what their revenues would have been. And that's why the first quarter financials now come back with a $54 million above projections. So I know that you said earlier, and it's important that we do give the country as accurate as possible assessment of our financial situation now as possible, because the people will rely and hold the elected arm, whether government or opposition, accountable for that information. So, for example, if this report projections by a revenue perspective, I'm not going to talk about expenses yet, but just from a revenues perspective, were off in their projections by the whopping $54 million, that automatically means that the $54 million than you thought you would have had. So if everything else stays the same over the next 3 quarters, you would be sure to say, without any severe economic events, COVID, drop in the economy, because they would be projecting slow season. They would be projecting the last quarter with Christmas, with tourism, that also already had the first quarter where all the financial services fees and all that come in. So they'll do their projections. So that would mean if nothing goes off the rails and they don't do anything different, you'd have a surplus of $27 million. That's ultimately what the report would be saying. So I heard that you suggested that when speaking with those officials from finance, and I want to say, by all means, these 2 individuals are very competent, and I respect and look up to them as well. But projections are what they are. They're projections. They're not actuals. And now that the actuals are in, it's only fair to say to this country that the country would not be in a deficit, because what naturally is going to happen, and all 3 of us in the room being in the political arena know how the political part of this is going to play out. It's going to say, oh, we came in, we made this adjustment, that adjustment, and we've saved the country, and we're no longer in a deficit. When truth, in fact, is the hard work of the previous government have now put them in a financial position not to be worried about a deficit. Matter of fact, even the second quarter would be the revenues and such will be the effect of the past government, and I suspect that the second quarter will also be a rather positive by way of revenue, and they would not have had any chance to do anything material in that short period of time to say that we were the reason why the revenues were as such. So the question is, well, why were we projecting such a major deficit? And I would like to, if possible, you still there?
Yeah, we're still here.
Harris?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Listening very carefully, Minister. Mr. Brian.
Thank you so much. So we know that the revenues is $54 million than expected for this first quarter. That's good. This is good. All of this is good news for the country, you know.
Of course.
It's not a bad thing. But the question is, how did we get so wrong in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
And why did we get in this deficit? It's either the revenues were less than what we think we're going to get, or the expenses were more than we had budgeted for, one way or the other.
Or
so we just
combination of both.
Or a combination of both. Thank you so much, Mr. Solomon. So now that we've dealt with the revenues and the fact that projections are projections, and they didn't have the actuals when they had the report, and we now have the actuals that say $54 million more, and we know that if you take away 26 from 54, you get, I think, if my math is correct, $27 million if nothing changes in surplus. But the question we had to ask ourselves is, how did we get in this mess in the first place? And I had to go through the report just like you did, Austin. I could have seen you were probably doing the same thing I was doing last night, going through the numbers, going, what happened? What happened?
Yep.
And I want you to turn your attention, if you can, to page 50 of the preview financial update.
Okay.
All right. And when you get to it, you let me know. I'll explain to the public how we got ourselves in this mess in the first place and question who had the responsibility for it.
I'm there.
Okay. The last graph at the bottom, you see it says unaudited actuals for Note 9, outputs of statutory authorities in government-owned companies.
Yes.
And if you look down, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The 8th line, Health Services Authority.
Yes.
You'll see that the original budget for it was $46 million.
Mm-hmm.
And this preview have done the reprojections on how much expenses the Health Services Authority would cost us. And they recalculated it for the whole year to be $62 million. That's $18 million in difference. Now, I want you to go over to the left-hand side of that column, and you look what the actuals was for the year before, 2024. It was $65 million for last year. So why was it budgeted for 46 in the first place? Now, I'm going to ask you, who's in charge of this Ministry of Health Services at the time the budget was approved? I'll leave you to answer that question. Let's move over to the next page, on page 51.
Yes.
Note 10, outputs for non-government supplies. And you're going to find a NGS 55, which I know all three of us in the room are very familiar with that output.
Yes.
That takes up a lot of the tertiary medical care in various overseas and local providers, where we take care of those who don't have health insurance. And if they have a severe problem, cancer, brain surgery, accidents, or whatever it may be, the government takes care of its people.
Yes.
But we're
It's
going to go back to the
always
stream.
traditionally a very high-ticket item, and we always
Correct.
under-forecast for that
Exactly.
NG55, and that's also not unique this time, but it's a constant. But yeah, continue.
It's a constant thing. Thank you so much for highlighting that, because it's going to be relevant in a second. So the original budget was $14.426 million. Call it $15 million.
Yep.
You see what the preview is now saying it should have been?
$60 million.
$60 million.
Yeah.
And you see what it was last year was $57 million. Now, we don't know what the previous year of 2023 would have been, and ask ourselves the question, on January 1st of 2024, which is the first day of this 2-year cycle, when we, myself, the Honorable now Premier, and former Minister Sabrina Turner, approved the budget, and we approved it with a whopping drop of $45 million. Which minister put that budget forward? Why would you suggest, when you know that we're going to be around the $55 to $60 million range, budget only for $14 million? Again, which minister was in charge? Let's move over to the next page, 52, for the transfer payments. And I want you to go down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth line. And this is for permanent financial assistance. This is for the NAU persons out there that we take care of for one reason or another. They don't have the ability to take care of themselves. They're elderly, and they're in permanent help.
Right. And again, another traditionally under-budgeted line item year on year on year on year. But
correct.
Yes.
To the amount of $20 million. So I know I'm repeating myself, and I know you get it, but I'm trying to do it for the public.
Yes, sir.
If you were just to add those three together, it's a whopping $85 million under budgeted by two ministers, Andre Ebanks and Sabrina Turner. And we asked ourselves why we're in this position. I'm going to be honest with you. The truth is, you see the former Honorable Premier, Juliana O'Connor Conley, sometimes she's too kind because she didn't want to bring it up as an issue to say her former ministers under-budgeted their own accounts. And she was a professional about it. She says, you know what? We're doing well. Our projections look good. We're going to be okay, and we're going to make a surplus. The fact that the problem that we have here is the timing. If the election was 1 month later, we wouldn't have been questioning this, and this wouldn't have been a report out there suggesting that there would have been a deficit, because we were confident in our hard work and that the projections were going to come in. One thing you also know, Austin, being a former junior minister, as well as Mr. Solomon, is that the traditional thing that is done in the civil service is this. You underestimate your revenues and you overestimate your expenses, because the end result will always be that you are able to cover everything. It's a conservative approach, and I respect it. But a conservative approach did not help the democracy of this country when the people had a report suggesting that there was going to be a $26 million deficit. When we know, in fact, now, when the actuals are in, there will not be a $26 million deficit unless, which we will be monitoring as opposition very closely what the government does with the finances from this day moving forward, because if they do anything untoward, which they shouldn't do until they get their own budget on the 1st of January, 2026 is when they're supposed to be changing. So there's no reason right now for altering of any approaches. You notice that thus far, I haven't said anything about capital, which is what was the argument to say why we're in this position is because of the school, because of this, because of that. The reasons why we're in this position has nothing to do with the capital. The capital changes. The capital budget does not change at all. It's the expenses and the revenues that have changed. Either the projections and the projections for the amount of money we were bringing in wasn't enough, or we spent too much on the expenses. And it's not even the salaries, because if you look within the first 3 quarters, the civil service actually did a good job. They had a savings of $5.1 million where they didn't spend or didn't hire as many people as possible. So it's not even the civil service. Now, there was an increase for COLA, which I know and I am confident that everybody would agree was deserving to the hardworking civil servants. But that did not even touch our drop in the bucket compared to the almost 85 million or above in respect to these under-budgeted ministries. So that's where the problem came in. But what I think could have been smart for the democracy, and this is why I say this is a good governance concern, and I'm almost wrapping up now, Mr. Austin.
Sure. We got about 4 minutes left.
I got about 45 seconds. Why I say this is a good governance concern is because if we saw the actuals by the middle of April, the finance team could have looked at what has come in and could have altered this report to say, you know what, by the looks of it, the actuals are coming in, because this is a time-sensitive matter. You're supposed to be able, by a click of a button, know exactly where we are financially. But there's always a delay on our revenues. So I would have, if I spoke to the governor about this, I said, I think that we need to be more efficient with this, or make sure that the date of the election is far enough away from the first quarter so it doesn't have an effect on the election. Because they could have done a reassessment to say, you know what, 2 weeks before the election, we see that this is a political football, but the truth is, the way the numbers are coming in right now, it looks like they're going to have a surplus in the first quarter, because they would not have known when this report was completed. And now, unfortunately, it's too late now. The people have voted, and they voted for different reasons. And I know that the budget and how you handle the country's money was definitely one of those concerns for why people voted. I'm not here to scream I'm not here to scream about spilled milk. It's over. I congratulate the Honourable Premier, Andre Ebanks, and his team, and I'm there to support as much as I can so Cayman has a better future, and hold them accountable where responsibly and necessary as my constitutional job. But this is not good for democracy, because it was too close for the election. Mm-hmm. And the truth is, they're not going to have a deficit come the end of this year. And we all know it. Those who are from the accounting principles that understand this know that we're not going to have a deficit, and the people voted on the basis, some people voted on the basis of what is perceived to be irresponsible management of the country's finances. That's what I have to say. And I'm happy to answer anything that you have in respect to that, but I just want to summarize those points, and I have the reports here if you want me to opine on anything further.
No, just very quickly, you mentioned, or you highlighted a lot, the difference between projected and actual results. I also want to point to you to the bottom of page 4, where it reads, the PREFU has the 2024 unaudited actual results as its foundation, which allows comparison to be made in respect to the projected results for 2025 and 2026. So yes, whilst you are correct that we are comparing projected versus actuals, but at its foundation or core, the pre-election financial update is using the actual results that ended the year in 2024. And again, that's from the same document that we're both reading from.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's why I'm not suggesting we come down on the persons, the authors of this report, because they're only doing it based on the data that they have.
Yes.
But it's too close of a call to the election when we now have the actuals, which is $54 million in difference in that projection. Yeah. That's a significant amount of money.
Sure it is.
Absolutely is. I just want to say, Mr. Bryan, thank you very much for calling the program. And if for what it is worth, I agree with you. I think that there is, again, let me take, if you have the time, let me say this. I too do not question the competences of my good friend, Oh, I got 1 minute. I got a one finger going up. I don't have much time to talk, so I don't know if you want to hold on. We can continue the conversation after the break.
I'm happy to hold on.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much, Brian. We have to pause and take a break, right? Just in about a minute.
Yeah, we have about 45 seconds remaining. So if you can make a quick observation and then come back and make your.
Well, I simply want to say that there are some things that we can learn from what has occurred. Let me summarize it to say that there are some things that we can learn from what has occurred, and we need to discuss those things and learn from it moving forward.
Absolutely.
Because one of the things I mentioned yesterday was similar things happening on Auditor General's report being tabled in the House and released to the public. It is a similar situation, I think, occurring here.
Indeed. Well, it is 28 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock, and we do need to pause and take a short commercial break. It will be about a 3-minute break. Obviously, the Deputy Leader of the Opposition, Kenneth Bryan, is on the line, and he will stay with us. Keep it locked. There'll be more Straight Talk coming up next here on Bobo FM.
More Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio coming up. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Bobo 103.1.
The Cayman Turtle Center's Turtle Crawl 5K is back, Sunday, June 8th, starting from the Cayman Turtle Center at 6:30 a.m. Registration is $25 CI and includes a race shirt and a goodie bag. All funds raised will support conservation of green sea turtles in the Cayman Islands. Corporate discounts are available by emailing info@turtle.ky. Register now for the Turtle Crawl 5K at turtlecrawl.ky. Proudly sponsored by Advanced Fire, Corporate Electric, CG Brit K, and Yanni's Photography.
At Polar Bear Air Conditioning, we believe in helping you to avoid costly mistakes and replacements. That's why we offer a quarterly maintenance program at a discounted price. You'll receive a 10% discount on all repairs, accessories, and services. Priority front-of-the-line customer status, reminders of your service, and no overtime rate for after-hours calls. Why not save money and avoid hassle with Polar Bear Air Conditioning? Need service now? Book our AC special for just $99. Book the next available technician at polarbear.ky. That's polarbear.ky.
Looking for TVs, electronics, sound systems, speakers, gaming consoles, games, and smart home gadgets? Shop Cost You Less.
Looking for housewares, small appliances, fans, mini fridges, and cooling? Shop Cost You Less.
Looking for baby supplies, toys and games, pet supplies, cleaning supplies, and auto supplies? Shop Cost You Less.
Looking for quality produce, grass-fed meats, and groceries? You guessed it. Shop Cost You Less.
Cost You Less is your destination for everything you need on island. Cost You Less. Everyday low prices on items that matter to you.
Cayman, Units is here, the island's newest move-in and storage solution. Our robot delivery system allows you to put your unit almost anywhere while providing level loading, uploading, and minimizing shifting. What's even better, no time constraints. Pack at your own pace for moving or store as long as you need. Short-term or long-term, at the home or on the job site. Units, fast, safe, and secure. Check us out at units.ky and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram.
Shirts, pants, or linens. When you want them clean, just drop them off at Island Cleaners. Island Cleaners is a full-service dry cleaner, meaning you name it, they clean it. Professional shirt service, fluff and fold laundry, and more. Even drape and area rug cleaning and alterations, from quick hem jobs to resizing dresses. Island Cleaners, your one stop for everything clean. Artco Drive off Shedden Road. Ask about VIP and prepaid discounts.
When it comes to cooking for my family, I turn to Kirk Market for all our nutritional needs. Whether whipping up a quick stir fry with lean CAB choice beef or preparing a healthy weekend dinner with fresh local snapper, Kirk Market always has exactly what I need. At Kirk Market, I find premium proteins that keep my family healthy, energetic, and always coming back for seconds. Visit Kirk Market today. Bring home the quality and freshness your family deserves. Kirk Market. Eat well, live well, and experience a world of choice.
Across Cayman on FM, online, and on your smart speaker. This is Bobo 103.1. Powered by Health Services Authority. Committed to caring for you. The views and opinions expressed on Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio do not necessarily reflect or represent the views of Stingray Media, its staff, or contributors. Callers to the program accept full responsibility for the views expressed. The show host and affiliates are not liable for any statements made or any harm claimed. All callers to the program indemnify Straight Talk from all claims. Offensive, defamatory, or unlawful content will not be tolerated. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Now, here's Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio on Bobo 103.1.
And welcome back, K-Man, to more Straight Talk here on Bobo 103.1 FM with your host, Ellio Solomon, myself, Austin Harris. And we continue our discussion with the Honorable Kenneth Bryan, Deputy Leader of the Opposition. You still with us, sir?
Yes, I'm still here, gentlemen.
Fantastic.
He's listening in.
He is listening in.
So,
obviously, we didn't have the time to hear more from my colleague Ellio, who had more to say. We want to give the floor to him.
I have a couple of things to say about this, and I've had a little bit of a discussion offline, if you'd like, on text with someone. And having that discussion also allows me to see some of the, what's percolating in people's mind.
Yes.
And to be able to address this, right?
Sure.
Let me first of all state that, I'm in large part in complete agreement with what Mr. Bryan is saying. And let me tell you why I'm saying that. I think if you look, and I mentioned this a few days ago, if we look at this preview, without me getting into all of the specifics, I am pretty sure that in large part, the reason this was being done is precisely what the name suggests, the pre-election forecast. And that is to be able to give the people a sort of a financial report card of the outgoing government or the present government that might very well be outgoing. So it is very much a report card. And that is significant in one person. A person has to recognize the significance of that, because you are in essence saying, I want you to judge, assess the government in power at the polls based on this preview. If it hasn't been stated in the terms of reference or on some particular piece of paper, I can assure you that's what it is. It says pre-election
financial
update or whatever. Yeah. All right. So where do we have a challenge? Because if you look in this particular case, and I'm going to summarize this so I think hopefully the public can understand as well, there were projections made by professionals. No one is challenging the competences of those persons. They made some projections that said to you that by the end of the year, based on what we are seeing, there is going to possibly be a deficit, and it would be around $26 million. That's what they said. That was a projection based on what they had. Now that actuals have come in, the reality is different. And the reality would suggest that now they're getting a $54 million plus surplus, which means if you extend it out until the end of the year, you're not going to have a deficit position. In fact, based on that alone, on a linear projection, you're probably going to end up with $28 million surplus. Just a sort of flip of what was projected. Why is that significant? It is significant because that information is thrown out to the media, it is published, and no one can argue that it would not have had some impact on at least one person in the room. At least 18,000 people who went to the polls had to impact one person's decision. I would like to say more, but it has impacted people's decision in terms of who they would vote for. And so let me say this, and not that he necessarily needs it, but in defense of the honorable member on the phone. In this country, we were very quick to say something, what was I called yesterday? Defensive. I'm defensive because I'm supposed to let you call, beat me up, say nonsense, and not reply. And we are supposed to also sit here, and no one is supposed to complain. The honorable members who lost their seats, and let's just stress for the point, he has kept his seat, won by a landslide. But it is a matter that we simply can disregard that and say, just crying over spilt milk and X, Y, and Z. This is nonsense. You look at whatever is occurring and you have to be able to say, what can we learn from this? And you'll remember I stated during this process, Mr. Harris, that I can recall, and I don't want to call the name of the individual because it's irrelevant. there was an individual that was hosting the show with my colleague, Austin Harris. And I remember coming on a talk show when I was in the government arguing that the Auditor General's report should be tabled, and then you allow PAC to review and to put its comment on the table, and then it should be published and released to the press.
That's correct.
That little guy from the UK, Mr. Dan Duguay, was completely arguing it should be able to be released.
Right.
Your colleague...
He didn't want you to usurp his otherwise
Right.
authority.
He wanted immediate access to the press. I argued that it should not have been. And let me just state, I didn't get any benefit out of it doing either way. The colleague that sat on this talk show with you took a different position. His position, I agree with Dan Duguay, which is typical in Cayman, you know. The little guy from the UK said it. So he agreed that it should be released, and he paid the price because there was a report that was released on him.
Yep.
And it didn't have a chance to get the second part from the PAC, and he got his ass bit.
Yep.
Okay? So that's the kind of nonsense that you have to deal with. You have to correct these problems, because if not, it will come back to haunt some other administration. I've had to make tough decisions, and I've tried to do it to say, Ellio, are you making this for this particular group or for everyone across the board? We have to see what we can learn from this briefing. So let me just very quickly throw something, pull it out of my hat, because I haven't had a lot of time to think about it. But first of all, anyone looking at the media here in Cayman know that a lot of them are taking sides, to put it mildly. And also, you have not only the media, but the average person is not an accountant. They don't know all the intricacies, and they're going to make the same errors that was made by yourself or other individuals and say, I missed the concept that this was first quarter. And does the average guy know that the majority of revenues come into government, the coercive revenues coming in the first quarter, and then after that you start losing? Did the average guy know that? No, he does not. And this is why I would suggest half their schooling in law on Fridays. I'm going to suggest that what should happen is that there should be a proper press briefing in the future where all of these things can be enunciated, articulated, etc. And let me tell you, you can't bold it enough to say these are projections subject to change, either for the good or for the bad. One hurricane tomorrow can throw it off. All of these things cannot be articulated, enunciated enough. Because I don't care if it's Mr. Brian running or anybody else, if it's you or me tomorrow, another person, I don't care who it is. This pre-fu is going to impact how people are going to view the government and aid in determining one way, shape, or another whether they regain their seats or not. And what we have already seen in summary is that so far, and again, let's stress, that can change too. But so far, the error has occurred in the projections by $54 million. And if I can just drive it home one more before I turn it over to Mr. Bryan in case he wants to say something before his departure. You have your little company, Mr. Harris, or the average guy out there has his or her company. And I'm making projections for you. And I make a projection that's incorrect. And based on that incorrect information, you lose your project. You lose a bid. Yeah. You know, that big $1 million bid that you were going to get because the projections were off by 54,000 or 54 million. You're not going to be happy. You're going to be extremely peeved. This is what has happened. So am I saying that Mr. Jefferson and the group is false? Absolutely not. Their projection is fine insofar as what they had. I think what, if anything, we can learn from this at the minimum is the same thing I mentioned years ago insofar as the Auditor General's report being released to the public, to the press. No, this needs to be done in a different way because what information you are putting out is going to impact lives significantly. And with that, I throw it over to Mr. Bryan if you have anything to say before you go, but those are my comments.
Well, Mr. Solomon, I think you said a mouthful there, and thank you for that assessment, because that's what it needs to be looked at, more so about every future administration and people's lives, because it does have an effect on it. But I want to say apologies to the People's Progressive Movement. I'm going to tell you why I'm apologizing. Because the People's Progressive Movement added me, the Honorable former Minister John Seymour, and the Honorable Juliana O'Connor-Connolly. And strategically, from a political perspective, it was seen that the PPM is bad when the PPM had nothing to do with this current or the just past administration. So the results of it, and it was unfair to them. And I feel so bad because their brand is now being affected by the work of ourselves, as well as members who are now in charge of the government. There's 6 members over there in the government today that were part and parcel of the approval of the budget that had the deficits upon which this preview made the projections for $26 million deficit. That's the part I think that the average person, like you said, Mr. Solomon, doesn't do accounting to understand. And the truth is, I'm so over it. The election is over. I have a new role now, and I'll focus on that. And I hope my team and I will be doing that. Our role, which is a very important one, is holding the government accountable and supporting them where necessary. But it is important that the country is not duped into a thinking that the changes or the behaviors of this new administration when the end of this year comes was because of them, because the finances are set the way they are set until the end of this year, because the budget has to be approved by all members of parliament. It doesn't get approved in cabinet. So regardless of what they're doing there, unless they come back to parliament to make supplementaries, it would be the work that was already approved by all members. So if they're good and the bad, we have to take it in together. So I want to say thank you so much for the opportunity, and I want to say thank you to the Honourable Premier, former Premier Juliana O'Connor-Connolly, because she gets a bad rap, and sometimes she's too good for her own fault, where when we should have done the political thing and highlighted these things, we didn't, because it was the mature thing to do, and as a result, sometimes doing the best thing, you end up getting the fault for it, and that's ultimately what happened. And I'm proud to say she was a good steward. Remember this, I close with this. The approval of this last 2-year budget was on the eve of the resignation of Wayne Panton. You remember there was a no confidence motion, and there was weeks where people were saying, oh my God, are we going to be able to approve a budget? In the midst of all that, she had to take all of that on, where a budget was practically almost finished and had to get it in time to Parliament before the constitutional obligation of getting it done before the end of the year. And she managed that and highlighted two of the ministries where there was deficits and say, guys, I don't think this is a good thing, blah, blah, blah, blah, blah. And we managed it to say, listen, we're going to do well, we're going to make our projections, we're going to be able to do this. We were confident that this was not going to be the problem. But naturally, the officials who are responsible for this has to be super conservative and has to be ultra sensitive to the expenses. So we didn't have a say in that. It is what it is, but I just don't want a year from now for some unjustified glory to come around and say, oh, we fixed the country and the deficit, because the truth is there's not going to be a deficit. If we were still there, not suggesting that that's what the people would have wanted, the voters voted on what information they had. But the revenues, particularly for the second quarter, I want you to take a close look at that when that comes in. The truth is this government will not probably be able to effectively do much until the third quarter or the fourth quarter. So with that being said, I'm going to stop there. I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to vent it, because it's an important one from a democratic and election process that we have to figure out. And I'm hoping to propose some changes of when legally they're obligated to do that, or at the very least, an election has to be a certain distance away from a preview our first quarter results, because it obviously factored in this election. Gentlemen, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Welcome, sir.
I appreciate it.
Indeed. Thank you, Mr. Bryan, for taking the time to spend as much time as you did on the phone lines, albeit, to really point out your position and your viewpoint on this issue and share it with us and our listening audience. Again, I guess providing justification, Ellio, that we really do need to make a concerted effort to, establish those preset days where we hear from the opposition and when we hear from the government. And certainly if they have their ears on, certainly this is a conversation that we're very eager to have. But, again, we have to have an opportunity to initiate those conversations.
Well, I think it would be fair, again, in the spirit of transparency, we've done our part. We've reached out. In this particular case, we've had discussions with the opposition in a public way.
Yes.
Mr. Bryan has talked about himself and other members of his team insofar as the opposition coming on the program. And once he reaches out to us, again, for the benefit of the listening audience, once he reaches out to us, then we're going to go ahead and make sure that we can set a date or days, however they want to do it. Normally, in the past, it's always been a sort of a specific day that the opposition will always come on. And I've also done the same thing insofar as the government. I mean, we want the government to be able to come on the program as well. I've sent a text on to the Premier himself, and we can formalize it and give it in a nice letter. But he did respond and said that we're sure we'll be in touch with you.
Yes.
So if the opposition under the government doesn't come on, it's definitely not for us trying.
Right. No, absolutely. You're absolutely correct. Again, we've extended the olive branch, and certainly we're hoping that olive branch will be well received, and certainly we'll get, some feedback, because we do want to be able, as I said at the beginning, it's more important for us to present a show 5 days a week that you, the listening audience, actually learn something that you didn't know the day before. It's more about, public education than it is about public entertainment, at least for our part, and these are the goals that we've set for ourselves. I just want to pick up on two things before we move away from this topic altogether. The first instance is the last comment that the Leader of the Opposition made that really, and again, I think we provided this analysis following the election, that we really didn't vote for change. I mean, when we look at the makeup of the current administration, both government and opposition, we didn't vote for change. As I said, we basically rearranged the deck chairs on the Titanic, and that may be a loose analogy, but to the caller's point, 31% of the current government, 6 members, were persons who largely, whether you agree or disagree, were culpable or responsible for the financial forecast position that we're in or we're not in and whatnot, but we didn't vote for change. That's the first thing. The second thing is, though, and this is, I think, the overarching point, which I think is so important to mention, and yes, to your point, that the general public aren't accountants. They're not understanding these figures clearly from an accounting perspective, and they depend on the media, people like you and I, and the government to educate them. But as it relates to the budget and who is responsible for what and who should be held accountable for what, when we look at the line items that the Honorable Kenneth Bryan just mentioned, tertiary overseas medical care and financial assistance relevant to NAU, those are 2 line items that have traditionally, one government after the next, been under budgeted for at the budget time when it comes before the House. And maybe that's because obviously it's hard enough to balance the budget with all of the various needs than, to perhaps represent the actual figures. And of course, there is the, assurance that as the country's revenue position improves, then the same parliamentarians can go back to the Legislative Assembly for supplementary funding, which was the case in both the overseas medical care and the financial assistance relevant to NAU, to go back and say, listen, the reality is we need more money. But the reality is also legitimate that all 19 members voted for and in support of these budget items as budgeted, as did they support the supplementary expenditure items. And when they came back to the House and said, well, I know we budgeted $12 million, but really we need $35 million, and they gave it to them. So it is par for the course, but I think when we ask ourselves, well, how can we truly trust the annual budget? Well, the only indication the Joe public has on the budget is when they listen to the budget debates in the House and how members vote. Perhaps we could use with a little dose of honesty to say that when we look at those 2 line items going forward, that we know outright that these are understated values, much like what has been criticized on the Regen project, for example. The Auditor General suggested that one of the reasons it failed from the previous administration standpoint, that it was going to cost us about $790 million a year over 25 years, but that even that figure was understated and probably is going to cost us closer to $1 billion. I think at some point in time, we have to start trading or discussing and engaging on real terms as opposed to, again, the projections we set for ourselves, which we know going into it are understated, that we know going into it are not going to be enough to cover the actual costs, yet we vote for it nonetheless.
Well, I see 2 factors at play on that particular one. And just to address the first thing about, the average guy not being an accountant, completely agree. And just to comment once more on the preview with respect to that. I think the average guy is just walking around and he has his or her life to attend to, their own families, and they are depending on the media, which is why, to me, it is such a disservice to the general public when you have media selling their own agenda or the agenda of somebody else with disregard, blatant disregard, wanton disregard, if you like, for the truth. And I have mentioned before some of these media houses that I don't think deserve the light of day. But that said, you know, when it actually comes to some of these areas, like, say, health services, and you've also mentioned, it's not social services now, what is it?
Financial assistance.
No.
Or the needs assessment unit.
Need assessment unit. I think and there are some departments, and again, perhaps I don't have the proper nomenclature, but you would have some departments where the predictability or the predictiveness of that projection is higher. It's more accurate.
Right.
You know, a particular department can say, I know what I want to accomplish this year, and here's X, Y, and Z. Whereas HSA, you know, they have a lot of finger in the air to do.
Yeah.
Like, how many people are going to get sick this year? Well, let me see.
Yeah.
Let me see. You know, and how many people are going to walk in this year from NAU? Which I hope we can prepare for that, because if Cruz goes, we can get a lot more. But
that's what we believe.
Right. So all of these things is a finger in the air, really, and not a bad finger.
No.
Okay, it's the index finger I'm referring to.
Yes, sir.
The little wet index finger goes in the air because you're really trying to make a guess, because the predictability of that is a little bit, it's lower. The tolerance is higher.
Right.
Whereas I said before, there's some of them that is really narrow and is really based on they know what they have to accomplish in order to meet their remit for the general public. So, yes, we don't know what's going to happen. And again, just to close it off on the preview, all we can say so far is that based on the actuals that have come in, we're expecting a $54 million surplus. And you can see that you would take at least an additional $28 million in expenditures to put you in a bit of a pickle. So either way, hopefully we've learned something from that. I just want to implore, for what it's worth, just a lonely voice crying here in the wilderness, that we look at how that preview is going to be disseminated in the future. I would encourage, and Mr. Jefferson, let me just stress, is in my opinion, an honorable man.
Yes.
I've known him for years, worked with him, you know.
Likewise, Mr. Matthews.
I love the guy, and I was just going to go on to Mr. Matthews. Don't know him as much, but I know him a little bit enough to say I have a great respect for him. But I think how we go ahead and disseminate this information, where we disseminate it and how we disseminate it, is so important, because you can't bold or underscore enough that this is projections and that there's a lot of guesstimates, etc., you know, educated estimates in there. All those things, I think, needs to go to the public in the proper manner.
No, you're absolutely right, and I thank you for sharing those comments. And again, we thank Mr. Bryan for calling in and, again, providing a broader elucidation on the point and certainly his perspective on the whole conversation. The phone lines are open. 745-2626 is the number, or you can reach out to us on our WhatsApp number by dialing 928-2562. Just very quickly before we go off to the next break at what is now 57 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock, we just got a WhatsApp message. We were talking earlier on that we better enjoy this long weekend because we might not see another one until November. But I guess we both misspoke because we missed two more holidays. The one is coming up in June and one is coming up in July. So at least there'll be at least two more long weekends for folks to enjoy. In June, of course, we have the official birthday of His Majesty the King. And in July, we have a public holiday to celebrate Constitution Day. But after July, that is it. No more until November. So enjoy your long weekend. This weekend, of course, Monday is Discovery Day, the 19th of May. There will be no Straight Talk show for that day. There will be another public holiday in June, or a long weekend in June, and then one final long weekend in July, and then nothing.
Yeah,
until
that's when the arid extra dry occurs.
That's right. That's right.
Between July and November.
Indeed. And that's all right. You shouldn't have long weekends. You want to stay home, stay close to home because it's hurricane season, and, well, you shouldn't be traveling anyway. So It makes perfect sense the way it is. It is 58 minutes past the hour of 5 o'clock. We do want to, I think, pick up out two topics. Number one, there's an interesting headline in the Compass in particular today that takes a look at the ticklish issue relevant to the National Conservation Council, its makeup, and, of course, the discussions in terms of potential amendments. Will there be amendments to the National Conservation Act or otherwise? I want to touch on that because I think it's rather interesting. We'll share with the listening audience. And as we continue to point out, we have been continuing our analysis of the existing manifestos that make up the TCCP and CINP, the two dominant groups that make up the majority of members in this National Coalition for Caymanians, and in our own words, guesstimating what we think the similarities or synergies exist between the two, the commonalities, the things that the two groups agree on, which could form part of what will be included in the government's strategic policy statement. We heard just last week in the media report that the government has identified two of the things that we said we knew they would focus on, one of them being immigration reform. So I think we're on track. When we come back, we're also going to seek in the final 30 minutes to take a look.
How much time do we have for the break?
20 seconds, so you can't say anything.
Okay, I won't say anything.
You won't say anything. Good deal. Phone lines are open, 745-2626. You can reach out to us on WhatsApp, 928-2562. But we do need to pause for a brief commercial break, check in with the BBC News. But don't change that dial. There'll be more Straight Talk still to come right here on Bobo 103.1 FM.
Bobo.
How can we understand the world better?
The BBC World Service is a window onto the wider world.
A vantage point from which to survey a new horizon.
News, reports, and analysis from around the world.
Stories we think matter.
Different people from different societies.
We get to the heart of global issues.
News, stories, and global perspectives from the BBC World Service.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM.
The BBC is the world's most trusted news source.
And Bobo 103.1 is where you'll find the BBC World Service.
BBC News.
The world news from the BBC.
And the home of Cayman's most listened to top shows.
That's right, folks. Everyone is telling their mama about the cold hard truth.
And welcome to Straight Talk. I'm your host, Austin Harris.
And I'm Ellio Solomon.
Across Cayman.
On FM, online, and on your smart speaker. This is Bobo 103.1.
Welcome to our newsroom here in central London. We place ourselves here at a little desk right in the thick of things.
OS from the BBC.
We can catch the very latest news from our colleagues, not just in this enormous room, but also from our colleagues around the world.
I'm in the room where they're treating children.
This is a combat zone.
The situation after the typhoon is very complicated.
It was a very tense situation.
OS from the BBC.
The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo FM. This is Bobo 103.1, powered by Health Services Authority.
At Health Services Authority, they are committed to caring for you. They are Cayman's largest and longest standing healthcare provider, offering the most comprehensive range of inpatient, outpatient, and public health services at 9 different locations across all 3 islands.
Across Cayman on 103.1 FM, online, and on your smart speaker. The home of the BBC World Service. This is Bobo 103.1.
BBC News, hello, I'm Eileen McHugh. Israel has dropped leaflets across northern Gaza, urging Palestinians to leave the area as concerns grow that it's preparing to intensify its offensive against Hamas. Hamas says more than 100 people were killed on Friday. Israel says it struck dozens of terrorist targets. Amit Halevi, a member of the Knesset's Foreign Affairs and Defence Committee, told the BBC about Israel's aims for Gaza.
The ultimate thing in any war, and this is victory. And when I say victory, I mean not only military victory, but also victory over the ideological infrastructure of the enemy. This type of enemy, which is involved with the population, it's very, very hard to make the distinction between the population and the enemy because they were under extreme indoctrination in the educational systems and others.
Ukraine's major European backers have rallied behind the country after the first direct peace talks between Kiev and Moscow in 3 years ended without the 30-day ceasefire Ukraine wanted. Russian and Ukrainian delegates in Turkey did agree on the largest prisoner of war exchange so far. From Istanbul, here's BBC Monitoring's Russia editor Vitaly Shevchenko.
Up until the talks started, Ukrainian officials have been saying what we need is an immediate ceasefire lasting at least 30 days. That didn't happen. The head of the Russian delegation, Vladimir Medinsky, only said the two delegations had agreed to exchange their visions of how this is possible. Another thing the Ukrainians were demanding is a meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin. And the Russians, they took note of the request. So they're still outlining their vision of what should happen.
President Trump has accused the former FBI director, James Comey, of using a coded Instagram post, an image of 8647 in seashells. 86 can be slang for kill. Mr. Trump is the 47th president. Mr. Comey, fired by Mr. Trump during his first presidential term, took down the post after a backlash. Speaking to Fox News, he said Mr. Comey knew what he was doing.
He did it for a reason, and he was hit so hard. Because people like me, and they like what's happening with our country. Our country has become respected again, and all this. And he's calling for the assassination of the president.
The U.S. Supreme Court has retained a temporary block on President Trump's planned deportation of Venezuelan migrants under a 1798 law previously used only in wartime. The American Civil Liberties Union said the administration was about to deport migrants without giving them the required notice or the opportunity to contest their removal. World News from the BBC. The credit rating agency Moody's has stripped the United States of its AAA credit rating, warning investors about rising levels of government debt and a widening budget deficit. The agency has shifted the US rating down one notch to AA1, while changing its outlook from negative to stable. The man who tried to murder the British author Salman Rushdie in New York State in 2022 has been sentenced to 25 years in prison. Hadi Matar repeatedly stabbed Sir Salman at a literary event, leaving him blind in one eye. He told investigators he believed the author had attacked Islam in his controversial novel The Satanic Verses, despite admitting to only reading 2 pages of it. The International Federation for Human Rights has condemned what it called the summary execution of more than 20 men by the military in Mali. It wants an independent investigation into the circumstances of the deaths of members of the Fulani community. Julian Bedford reports.
Protests against the military authorities in Mali are rare, but there have been 2 days of demonstrations in Dir Farabe following the killings. The men were arrested on Monday, market day, seemingly because they were Fulani. Many of the jihadists in Mali are drawn from that ethnic group, but there is no evidence that these individuals had any connection to a militia. The men's bodies were subsequently found, their throats slit on an island in the Niger River. The military government in Bamako says it's investigating the incident.
A Swedish journalist who'd been jailed in Turkey on charges of membership of a terrorist organisation and insulting the president has arrived back home. Joachim Medin was in Turkey to cover protests against the arrest of Istanbul's mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu, who represents the biggest challenge to President Erdogan. Medin was detained in late March. BBC News.
Opinions expressed on Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio do not necessarily reflect or represent the views of Stingray Media, its staff, or contributors. Callers to the program accept full responsibility for the views expressed. The show host and affiliates are not liable for any statements made or any harm claimed. All callers to the program indemnify Straight Talk from all claims. Offensive, defamatory, or unlawful content will not be tolerated. Be a part of the conversation by calling 745-2626. Now, here's Straight Talk with Austin and Ellio on Bobo 103.1.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome here to Straight Talk. Just right here with your 2 favorite hosts, Austin Harris and myself, Ellio Solomon. And of course, it's just about 24 minutes left up in here in this beautiful, beautiful studio. I mean, we hate to leave it, but, you know, it's a long weekend.
It is.
And I just want to say that I have the pleasure of being sitting here up in here with my colleagues. We have a lot to discuss and not enough time to do it.
Yeah.
So Harris, hand it over to you.
All right. Well, just very quickly, again, another, I think, useful headline that we can talk about today, maybe add it to our list of conversation next week, if necessary. And that is The conservation case dropped as Compromise Council announced. A quick blurb. The court battle between government and the ousted members of the National Conservation Council came to an abrupt end on Thursday after a truce was negotiated. A compromise board has been appointed with the new coalition government, moving quickly to bring to an end what could have been a costly legal dispute. And just very quickly, of course, obviously this relates to the controversy some may recall in the discussions concerning the makeup of the National Conservation Council, which was also fueled under the previous administration by amendments that were proposed to the National Conservation Act. In that exercise, the UPM replaced the then board of the National Conservation Council with what was later referred in the public domain as political appointees, made up of MPs Ezard Miller, Arden McLean, Captain Eugene Ebanks, and Gilbert McLean, who was to be the chairman of the National Conservation Council. Well, this didn't sit well with the former board members, particularly the former chairman, Stuart Mailer, and Miss Patricia Bradley, the two members who brought the court challenge in the first place. However, on Thursday, the entire matter was laid to rest following lawyers from both parties returning to court, having settled the matter, with the new National Coalition for Caymanian Government agreeing to appoint an entirely new board, including members with relevant technical and environmental expertise. Among those appointed to the new government, by the new government, are environmental scientist Ian Kirkham, who will be the chair, Geddes Heslop, a wildlife biologist who works for the Cayman Turtle Center, Walling Whitaker, the former chief officer of the Department of Environmental Health, Catherine Childs, the National Trust Environmental Programs Manager, and Samantha Shields, Dean of St. Matthew's University on Veterinary Medicine. The board does not include the former chair, Stuart Mailer, or Patricia Bradley, but lawyers for the pair said that they were happy that their concerns had been addressed and that the makeup for the new board included enough expertise to fulfill its remit. Now, the article did not specifically state whether or not there would be any planned changes to the National Conservation Act. You will recall again that the controversial amendments did in fact come before Parliament at the latter part of January this year and was voted down by then MPs. Certainly a lot of it large and fueled and led by the TCCP members who said they certainly did not support it, and I suspect that there won't be any changes to the National Conservation Act going forward. But again, I think the key issue here is, the board members that were appointed and the trial that was being taken to court really left the country in a degree of limbo. And as was anticipated, we had our guest in studios, Mr. Arden McLean. He chatted about this, and he suspected that his words would come back to haunt him when he said, I'm no tree hugger. And, of course, that statement was pointed out in the news article as well. But, again, all's well that ends well, I suppose, is the lesson here. And, well, I guess it remains to be seen.
Well, there's a lot to stretch out on that particular discussion and see what we can learn from it. That's for sure. Worth of discussion, because again, if you're going to see that the government is saying it should be status quo, get back to the normal stuff the way it was in terms of getting the expertise, then amongst other things, that clearly says that the government is satisfied with the legislation, they're satisfied with the structure in terms of reference, et cetera, for the committee.
Yeah.
And all of that gives us some indication where we're going to go environmentally, right? So a lot of good discussions. And I also want, probably not today because we won't have the time to get into it, but I have been keeping a little quiet on the tourism issue, and I can't help but to know.
I've noticed that.
Yes. Well, I'm just giving a rest,
Sure.
At least someone say, look at that guy there. He's overzealous. He's defensive. One of my fans.
Yes.
But, I think.
Believe in the things that you stand for. That's no different than anybody else.
I do my best not to make it bother me. Like I remember one time our good friend Roy used to call Ellio, you guys be a little bit more dispassionate.
Yes.
I've always taken the position, if If I'm talking about something that I can't be passionate about, I don't think I should be talking about it.
Right.
You know, if you're looking for someone that's dispassionate, you got to find someone else.
Indeed.
But I have noticed lately, and I want to encourage the listening audience before we meet on Tuesday, which at that time I'm pretty sure I'll start off unless we have guests talking about this issue. I give you lots of time to think about it.
Yes. Prepare yourself.
Yeah, prepare yourself that the Cayman Compass in 2015 supported cruise peers.
Yes.
And in 2025, in the year of our Lord, just before Election Day, they dropped 3 bombs on the campaign. And all 3 of those was basically highlighting how the Compass was adamant against peers. Now, this is very, very interesting, other than the fact that, I mean, the timing of it should tell you, of course, we weren't being political. You know, like we only had 6 to 7 months to give our opinion. I mean, I'm sorry if it took us the last day before the election to inform you. But either way, interesting enough is that you have to note, I don't know if this is activist remorse or voters' remorse. I have no exact idea what it is. But you have to note that the Compass now is taking a turn. You know, everything now is... Hold on, I feel like that British guy that was doing a speech. So anyway, it's like yeah, hold on a second. If they're taking a turn now, and the turn is kind of one of those of, let's see what happens next. Yeah. And then there's little articles that it looks like more cruise tourists might be coming, almost like you're praying. Yeah. It's like, I'm praying I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to bring some cruise ships from Haiti soon, too.
Yeah.
You know, and then now in the Compass today is an article about, it sounds like you're highlighting, and this is probably one of the most fair articles that the Compass has written since the campaign began, that it actually sounds for once to be a fair assessment, and they seem to be indicating that we might actually need peers and that we will be seeing a downturn. No, so I just want you to note that, because if this trend continues, in about 3, 4, 5 months, you will never know that the Compass was against the peers.
Correct.
Just thought I'd let you know, you know. Just thought I'd let you know it. But again, we know what the projections and stuff are, and I think that we as a country, we have to sit back. I think the saying is, can't see the light, you feel the heat.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'll have to sit back and wait till we feel the heat and see what happens.
Well, certainly
But I want to discuss that maybe on Tuesday.
Well, certainly the country should be well versed in terms of what our position is on the subject. Yes, the country voted not in favor of cruise pier infrastructure, but we believe that was a mistake. We believe also, to your point, that according to the tea leaves that we've been reading, there is going to be a downturn in cruise tourism numbers, a fulfillment of what the cruise lines have been threatening in the Cayman Islands for many, many years. And in the year of our Lord 2025, we're going to see that reality played out. Don't be confused by this little blip on the radar that suggests because of Haiti's economic
security
concerns that we're getting perhaps, more than usual cruise passengers. Obviously, we welcome that. But the point here is it wasn't part of the plan. It wasn't part of the itinerary. This is a plan B approach for the cruise lines. Will they continue this going forward? The schedule doesn't suggest it. We believe that there will be a significant downturn in both cruise arrivals and cruise revenues. That will impact the government and certainly will also impact the lives of Caymanians. But to your point, we shall see if the media, some of whom who took a very hardline approach against it prior to the referendum and now are suggesting or at least representing an about-face, a change of position, or at least presenting a fair and balanced view. Yeah. One can only ask, well, where was that fair and balanced view when we were
during the campaign
in the thrust and throes of the debate and discussions, and now we come back out of it? But hey, to each their own.
And you see, this is why I highlight it. I don't want to be. I'm not doing it out of any maliciousness at all, but it is sad when we have a country that we can't sit down and just have a really logical and fair discussion. We are trying to inform people so that they can make an informed decision. And again, so when you have people that refuse to have the discussion, and then you have those who take one position, and now you see them, doing a big, huge ship turn, major thrusters, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
It's really concerning, because this is the sort of dialogue. Yeah. This is the sort of articles and discussions that we really needed to see during the campaign.
Yes.
Not post.
Yes, correct.
But either way, it is what it is, Mr. Harris.
It is what it is, and they will continue to do what they do, and we will continue to do what we do, led by our individual spirit and conscience. And again, we'll see which way the pendulum swings. Just very quickly, 17 minutes past the hour, 6 o'clock is the time, and whilst the phone lines still remain open, Fridays are usually relatively quiet on the phone lines because it is Friday. People are getting ready for the weekend and the long weekend. Many a person.
They're at the watering hole, probably.
They're either at the watering hole or at the airport, hopping on the flight to leave for the long weekend, which is fine because, obviously, Ellio and I hate talking to each other and not being interrupted by anyone. He says, tongue-in-cheek, just continuing our analysis of the manifestos, particularly between the former Caymanian Community Party and the Cayman Islands National Party. We still haven't been able to acquire the manifestos for the independents, Ralston Anglin, Isaac Rankin, and J.E. Banks. Certainly, again, we continue our plea to members of the public, but also those three members of the government. If you happen to have extras and you want to share it with us, we would love to receive it. Otherwise, we'll just, work without you. But trying to find areas of commonality, and I think we'll look at 3, maybe 4 areas today with your permission. First of all, traffic. Traffic was a hot-button issue, not only in this administration, but the last administration. And both the TCCP and the CINP seem to agree on the need to address the growing traffic concerns. However, their approaches differ slightly, but I also believe that these different approaches can be, if they choose to be proactive, merged together to form a salient thought. The CCP says it will accomplish the improvements to traffics by implementing designated bus lanes and incentives for park and ride initiatives, something that was proposed under the administration that I was a part of by both the planning minister and myself. Whereas the CINP proposed implementing a reliable, convenient, and safe public transportation system, again, something that was proposed under my administration, but picked up on under the UPM administration, led first by the Honorable Kenneth Bryan, and then picked up later on the later end, on the tail end, by Minister J.E. Banks. Obviously, Minister J.E. Banks will continue to be responsible for this area, so potentially he won't be starting back at square one, but he has the benefit of the information he gained under his previous 4 years. I think...
Was the transportations under Mr.
J.E. Banks, yes.
Okay.
So it'll be a good opportunity to really, if they're serious, to kick off a proper public transportation system, but also introduce, whether it be park and drive, whether it be designated bus lanes, whether it be buses for private schools, all of these things can be merged into a single salient thought. And I think you would agree that these are low-hanging fruit that the government could implement within its first 100 days. The CINP also speak on a subject that I think every political group or every politician mentions every couple of...
If I could just interrupt really quickly on the transportation, when someone made the suggestion of, making it somewhat mandatory, if you like, that persons in the private schools have to take the buses.
Yes.
To take a bus.
Yes.
Let me tell you, that's a pretty easy one, I think, and that would make a big difference. I think when the school's out or when school's in, trust me, that's a big traffic problem.
Yes.
Of course, when it comes to public transportation, I'm a big believer that we should have a monorail system. I think it allows us to be able to eat up some of these lines that are running all over the sky and making us look like a third world country. You can also put water in it, and you definitely have a monorail running on it.
Yes.
And serve many purposes, but discussion for another day. Please continue.
No, absolutely. On the overarching or perhaps a larger plan, the CINP proposed, again, the development of an updated master ground transportation plan, which, again, I think for the benefit of the listening audience, the master ground transportation plan is one of those old subjects that from time to time gets plucked off the shelf, blown the dust off of it, picked up again, saying we should really do something about this. The first master ground transportation plan was... I think debuted in the public domain some 37 years ago, 1988.
By none other than
the
Honorable Linford Pearson.
That is correct. The same person who, mind you, also made the first proposals on the PPP, the public-private partnership notion that seems to be very growing in popularity as a means of borrowing outside the conventional bank lending procedures. So again, perhaps one would say ahead of his time.
And the man who was brave enough to challenge the telecommunication giants and allow us to now have 2 or 3 cell phones on our hip.
That's right.
Did a lot.
He did a lot. That's why he's got a highway named after him. Now, again, CINP suggested that we develop an updated master ground transportation plan, which sought to, offer up or pre-plan the road corridors, what new roads will be, how many lanes they will be, where they will be, but doing so in advance, sort of creating a plan so that we can lead ourselves towards sustainable development, etc. Again, I think it's a lofty ambition. I certainly support the development of an updated master ground transportation plan, but unlike some of their other recommendations, I wouldn't call the MGT a low-hanging fruit item. I suspect it will certainly take a great deal more time to develop, but by all means, it certainly could be done. Also be added to their manifesto, to their plan and the strategic policy statement. Likewise, the National Development Plan, both the TCCP and the CINP, also in their manifestos.
I thought we agreed to shorten it.
We agreed to shorten it, the CCP. They both agree on the need for a national development plan, but both manifestos did not speak in any great detail as to how they would go about achieving it. The only, tangible plan that we have at least proposed on this, how do we move forward with the national development plan, came from the former PPM. They proposed, again, under our administration, 17 to 21, dividing the national development plan into 5 area plans using the 5 traditional districts that make up the Cayman Islands and reviewing each of these areas one every year. So at the end of a 5-year cycle, which of course is 1 year more than an elected administrative cycle, that we could theoretically, if we committed ourselves every year, 1 year we could look at West Bay, the next year we could look at Georgetown, the following year we look at, Bordentown, and so on and so on and so forth, until we as a country come up with a tangible plan in terms of how we want to see ourselves develop. I think it is a workable plan until the current government come up with an alternative in terms of how to address it. Obviously, we would like to see a national development plan developed. We would like to see it developed within the 4-year window of a current elected cycle versus, a 5-year cycle, which presumes that the next administration will take it up. But unfortunately, I guess there's not a lot of confidence so far anyway that a national development plan will be featured on the strategic policy statement. And if it does, it certainly won't be a low-hanging fruit item, but maybe a longer-term vision, probably much like the waste management plan, something that, may be presented in the final year, but still not acted upon until the following administration, which of course takes us lastly to waste management. The CCP manifesto proposes restarting the previous waste management plan from scratch. That is, again, perhaps bringing the dark group back to the table on the whole region subject by updating the business case and retendering in line with the procurement tenders to select a vendor. So basically, taking the plan that we had before that we deemed unworkable and restarting it again, which, by the way, took us almost 10 years to get to the point that we did, only to fall short. Whereas the Cayman Islands National Party have suggested the country should pursue a scaled-down version of the regen deal, suggesting that the proposals in the regen project were legitimate, but perhaps may have been lofty in their ambitions, and maybe may want to scale it back down. They proposed a modular waste-to-energy plant, comprehensive island-wide recycling, which is already happening, but perhaps at the national level, as well as introducing a composting program. This, I think, will appear to be largely, again, not on the low-hanging fruit, but something that may form as their larger, tangible plan. But I'm not going to jump for joy and, expect the unexpected that we're going to have a waste management plan in the next 4 years. I just don't see it, but maybe I'm wrong. So that's it.
We'll see.
We'll see you. So that is the, again, continued analysis of what we anticipate could be some of the synergies or ideas that the two major groups that make up the National Coalition for Caymanians can agree on and could very well form part of their strategic policy statement, which we anticipate will be presented in the public domain in the coming weeks, if not months, also with the development of the new government's first two-year budget, which, according to the law, the Public Management and Finance Law, or Act, that the government must prepare before the 31st of December of each year. So these two things we await on. We know that there will be a meeting of parliamentarians next week, Thursday, though not a formal meeting. This is largely a training meeting, as Mr. Ezra Miller shared with us. We'll have to wait on the government to know what the next formal meeting of Parliament will be. But trust me, when that does happen, you can count on Straight Talk being there to, pull out all the salient bits.
We'll
50 seconds remaining, Mr. Solomon.
And I will remind the public that the Honorable Speaker, the Honorable Ezra Miller, did mention that he'd most likely be coming back here on the program as well.
He did.
And enlightening us on different things. Ladies and gentlemen, I definitely want to thank you all very much for joining us today, of course, for listening all week. We greatly appreciate those persons who take the time out to call, and for those who don't, we appreciate you all the same. Can't be without you who's listening. I want everyone to have a wonderful and safe weekend. It is a long weekend. It's Monday. Mr. Harris, we didn't have a private discussion on whether we're taking a day off.
We're
Can we have that
taking
now?
the day off. We're definitely taking the day
You
off.
heard us.
We'll be back for Super Tuesday.
If you were over listening to our private conversation, you heard. We're taking a day off on Monday.
Have a good weekend, K-Man, and we'll see you on Tuesday for more Straight Talk right here on Bobo FM.
The home of the BBC World Service, the most trusted news source in the world. This is Bobo 103.1. The following commercial messages are brought to you exclusively